Hey folks, Professor K here. So today I'm really excited because we are starting our unit on Photoshop. And that doesn't mean we're ending our studies with Illustrator. We're going to be intermixing the two from now on. But what's great about Photoshop is that you get to work with photo manipulation and you get to really change the feel of photos. Honestly, Photoshop's it's really close to my heart. It's one of my favorite programs, not only because of all these great things you can do with photos. It's probably the closest of the Adobe programs to like a fine arts painting program or something like that, but also because as a web designer, for a long time, I used Photoshop to do my mockups. So today we're going to start by connecting our learning from Adobe Illustrator to Adobe Photoshop, because what you'll find is that there's a lot of crossover between different Adobe programs. Taking a few minutes today to understand where that crossover is and why you would use Illustrator over Photoshop is going to really help you cement your knowledge in both programs, as well as set you up for success in learning the rest of Photoshop. Let's get started. All right, so here on my monitor here, I have Adobe Photoshop open. And if we compare this just to start with Adobe Illustrator over here, you'll see that the two interfaces are really similar. For one thing, in the left-hand area, you still have the same menu items for home, learn, and then navigating your documents. So just like in Illustrator, where you could access, learn, and go through tutorials on the web, at the same time in Photoshop, you can also click this Learn button and get additional tutorials to learn how to use Photoshop beyond this class. These will cover things that go beyond the basics and will help you achieve specific project goals. In this class, I'm going to be focusing on teaching you the basics of tools and how and when to use them, along with some practice so that you'll understand where those tools are best used. So let's go ahead. And now that we understand that this is really similar, you might get really comfortable with the program. Let's go ahead and click Create New. And what do we notice that's different here? Well, the first thing to notice is that things will start in pixels. That's because Photoshop is a pixel-based editing program. And that's one of the big differences between Photoshop and Illustrator. Photoshop and pixels, they go together. Now, you don't have to know what those mean yet. Let's go ahead and open this up and I'll demonstrate it to you. So here, it's just started with whatever's on my clipboard. And I'm going to go over here and grab a photo so that you can understand what I mean by raster-based. All right, so I'm back and I found a photo that I think will demonstrate this really well. Here we have a photo of some packaging with some typography on it. We're going to compare this with what it might look like in Illustrator to help us understand the difference between vector and raster. So the easiest way to get a photo into Photoshop is to use Command-C to copy it and then Command-V to paste it in. And now you can see it's on the canvas, and over here in layers, it's also in layers. Before we manipulate this at all yet, I just want to use Command+ to zoom right in and show you what the difference between raster and vector is. Now notice as I zoom in, how you're starting to see pixels, these little squares that make up the image. All of these are just little bits of information, little colors that all come together to make us think that we're seeing a picture. However, Illustrator handles this a little bit differently. Let's open up Illustrator, create a new document, and just start with some regular old type in there. So here, let's just type out lorem ipsum, and we will shift and click to increase it. And then let's zoom way, way in, just like we did with Photoshop. And look at this. You don't see any pixels here. All you see is this curved line. That's because vector-based editing is based on mathematical curves. It's actual lines in here. And you can see that by going back, and I'm just going to zoom back out with Command-0, and going to Type, and then Create Outlines. That will show you the underlying curves and vectors underneath this type that make this up. So let's zoom in a little closer now, and now you can see each of those individual points that make up this typography. These don't exist in Photoshop, and that's why we use Illustrator and Photoshop for different things, even though they might seem the same. So let's head back to Photoshop here, and I'm going to give you a quick tour of what's available in here and what's similar to what's in Illustrator. So let's pop out. And again, I'm using Command- to zoom in and out, as well as the space bar. to pan around. So just like this, if we want to move around the canvas, holding the spacebar will allow us to do that. Let's take a look now at the left side of our user interface here. First of all, I'm going to make sure that I'm set up in the correct workspace. So let's go to Window, Workspace, and make sure you are on Essentials Default. If you have used Photoshop before, like I have, you may want to hit Reset Essentials so that we're all on the same page. I'm going to do that now. And in fact, you can see that I did have a few things up there that you wouldn't have seen because you're probably new to Photoshop. Now let's take a look at this user interface over here. Remember in Illustrator, we had a number of items that really helped us with vector-based editing. When we take a look at this in comparison with Photoshop, I'm just going to drag this over here a little bit so you can compare the two. Notice how these are actually not too far from each other. So here we have some sort of selection tools, right? We have some other types of tools that maybe we're not familiar with yet in Photoshop. And then going down the line, a lot of specific tools, but let's take a look over here. Look at this. This looks familiar, right? Here's that black arrow from Illustrator, the selection tool. And then here is this rectangle. The rectangle will draw vector shapes in Photoshop too. So we have some parity between the tools that are available in these two programs. But again, they each specialize in different things. So although you can find tools that are available in Photoshop in Illustrator, and likewise, tools that are available in Illustrator in Photoshop, we use Photoshop primarily for editing photos and not logos, type, and other vector-based imagery. So let's take a look at some of those familiar tools that we already know from Illustrator and why they might help us in Photoshop. Here, we have our rectangle tool. When we draw out a rectangle, it's going to look a lot like Illustrator. And if we zoom in really, really close, just like Illustrator, this is going to be using a vector line. So what you can know about that is it's vector-based, not pixel-based. And the reason why that can be great is it can give you really nice, crisp, clean lines. Look next to the everyday humans here and notice how this line is so much crisper than what's in the photograph. That can both help you and hurt you in creating a realistic image. As you can see, in realistic looking packaging, the lines aren't exactly straight and well defined like a vector is. So you can see if we zoom in here and we take a look at the line that's created by this photo, it's actually many different shades. And it's not always completely flat or straight. It does get a little bit of curve at the end. What you might think of as a really sharp corner, when you actually go to photograph it and you really look at it and see it, might not be the same. Noticing these differences is key to producing really realistic photo manipulations and getting across your ideas in Photoshop. Because what you can do with Photoshop is create images out of multiple images, composites, that can help you tell your story. But if you don't composite well and notice these differences in how things interact in a true photograph, people will see it and they'll immediately say, oh, this doesn't look quite right. It doesn't look quite real. So as you're beginning in Photoshop, notice the difference between the cleanliness of Illustrator and how well-defined things are, and then the realities of a photo, how soft the edge of the shadow is, how harsh it is over here in comparison. Noticing these details will help you. Let's see what else is underneath the rectangle tool. Let's hold it down. We can see rounded rectangle, ellipse, triangle, polygon, line, and custom shape, all just like Illustrator. So you don't have to relearn all of Photoshop. You already know some of what's in Photoshop here. In fact, you can do vector-based editing in Photoshop. Here's the path selection tool, also known as the selection tool in Illustrator. And if you hold down your mouse right over here underneath, you can also see that there is a direct selection tool. Let's select that and see how it works. Check this out. It's just the same as Illustrator. You get the 4 points and you can choose one point and edit this. Now there will be a few differences. Don't worry about the terminology, live shape into regular path, anything like that. I don't worry about it. Just hit yes. And suddenly you've got this shape that works just like Illustrator. And in fact, you even have, if you have sharp eyes, you may have noticed you have the pen tool available to you, and you can add points. You can create curves, adjust handles, all just like Illustrator. You'll also notice underneath the text tool, there it says Proxima Nova. Oh, that was really interesting. I wonder why that happened. So what happened there, what I just demonstrated, was I put down some type, but it turned into a selection. We'll learn more about selections soon. That's something that's new to Photoshop. But I think that was just really interesting that I got, oh, horizontal type mask tool. I had no idea that existed. Today I learned. Anyway, when I went to go and click, just like Illustrator, this creates a lorem ipsum. Unlike Illustrator, when you hold Shift, see how this is stretching the type? This is kind of like a weird feature that Photoshop implemented recently. Unlike the other Adobe programs, holding Shift in Photoshop does not keep things proportional. So keep this in mind. If you are used to holding Shift to keep things proportional, you may want to change this in your keyboard preferences. I'm going to leave it as is, just so in case you're coming in halfway through, things will behave exactly the same way as you expect. And I'll periodically remind you about that detail. Sometimes you get these little tips in the corner. I just like to close them out. Let's take a look at a few other things that we might be familiar with. Here we have the hand tool, the zoom tool as well. I prefer to use keyboard shortcuts for that. Again, that's going to be Command plus or minus, and then holding the space bar to pan around the image. It's a lot faster. Going to the right side of our user interface, let's notice a few things that are familiar to us over here as well. We have layers, and layers look a little bit different in Photoshop, but I actually find them a lot easier to understand here. So here we can see we have a text layer, an image, and a background. And just like in Illustrator, you can double click to rename them. You can also search by the kind of layer, and this can be really helpful when you've got tons and tons of layers on the canvas. That's not unusual for Photoshop. Layering is big in Photoshop, and you'll see why, especially when we get into compositing. So here you can filter by name. Let's say we're looking for rename specifically. You remember what the layer name is? That's a really easy way to help you navigate these layers. Another way that you can look by is by the color, whether or not it's selected, the effect or the mode, or even the kind. So in this kind bar, this one's pretty interesting. You can look for just images, or you can look for just text. And now you can see that I am only seeing the text down here. Using these filters will help you keep organized as well as find the different layers that you're working on when you're getting into more complex projects. To select something in Photoshop, you're going to use this move tool, this top sort of arrowy situation. Make sure that you're on that. And if you're ever unsure about where that is, just, I think you can hit the command and click and do the same thing. When you click on a layer in Photoshop right now, by default, it will move the layer you clicked on. You may find this easier in the beginning because you don't have to worry about what layer you're on. You click it and something moves. So notice I clicked the lorem ipsum and it's moving. I'm going to click the everyday humans and now that's moving. Down the line, you may find this a little bit more confusing and you may want to have more control over exactly what's being moved. In that case, there are ways to change this behavior, and that's the way I prefer to work myself. We're not going to worry about that just yet. I'm going to leave this as the default for now. What else should you know here? Let's talk about grouping. Just like in Illustrator, you can shift-click to select multiple things. And in fact, when you shift-click and move them, they will move together. But another great thing about this is that you can use the group command to keep these layers well organized and help you understand how they relate. So to do that, you're going to do Command G, just like in Illustrator. And again, you can double click to rename it. And let's call this our advertisement background. Now, whenever we have the advertisement background selected, whoops, you know what? This is where you might want to have some more control over your user interface. Do you see what happened there? I was about to say, when you have advertisement background selected in layers, when you go to move it, it will move the whole thing. However, that's not actually how Photoshop works anymore. So that's my mistake. What will happen is when you click on the image, it will move the image. When you click on lorem ipsum, it will move lorem ipsum. And then if you try to go back and click on the folder to move both, that's when things are going to get harder. So see, that's the exact point where you might want to change that default behavior in Photoshop, because sometimes you really need to move a whole bunch of stuff at once, especially when you're doing advanced compositing. And it can be just really tough to not be able to select that in layers and then move the whole group as one. So keep those things in mind. Notice also that you have the ability to change the font, the character. Let's go ahead and just demonstrate that quickly, just so you can see all the same things that you're used to from Illustrator are available here. So don't forget your typography, right? Your kerning, your leading, the space between lines. All of those are important here as well. So that about wraps it up for Photoshop Basics and how it connects back to what you already know in Illustrator. Hopefully you've seen through this video that there are some differences in between the two programs, but there's also a lot that you can rely on from learning Illustrator to help boost your Photoshop knowledge and learn even faster. So I'm excited to get further in and really learn some more advanced techniques using this program and then bring some of that knowledge back to Illustrator. I'll see you soon.